The coordinates came through the radio at 2:17 in the morning. No static, no panic. Just a calm, authoritative voice breaking the heavy silence of the night. Target confirmed. Enemy command inside the structure. Grid 492, you are cleared to fire. Inside the steel belly of the T-72 tank, no one questioned it. Why would they? The coordinates looked perfectly accurate on the digital map. The signal came through their encrypted battalion-level military frequency, and the building in question stood alone at the edge of a ruined, darkened city block. It was the perfect target. The gunner adjusted the thermal sights. The commander gave the order, fire. The tank cannon thundered. A massive fireball illuminated the ruined city for a fraction of a second, casting long skeletal shadows of destroyed buildings against the sky. Concrete collapsed into dust. Shattered glass rained down like ice. Secondary explosions ripped through the roof. Mission complete. Another enemy stronghold wiped off the map. Then, the radio crackled again. But this time, the voice was different. It wasn't calm. It wasn't authoritative. It was panicked, terrified. Stop. Stop firing. Static burst through the headset, loud and violently. Then, the voice shouted the words that froze the blood of every man inside that tank. That building was our position. You're firing on your own men. To understand how a highly trained crew could make such a catastrophic mistake, you have to understand the environment. Inside the armored vehicle, Calcine Hammer II, were 4 exhausted soldiers. Commander, Captain Victor Sok, a veteran whose eyes carried the weight of too many decisions. Driver Pavel, barely 20 years old, his hands perpetually blistered from the steering levers. Loader, Anton, broad-shouldered and quiet, covered in grease and cordite. Gunner, Sergei, the man with the deadliest trigger finger in the battalion. They had been fighting in this city for 6 days. 6 days of narrow, suffocating streets. 6 days of ambushes from basements and rooftops. 6 days of breathing in pulverized concrete and the smell of burning diesel. Urban warfare is pure chaos. There are no clear front lines. No safe zones. A building you cleared in the morning could be filled with enemy fighters by nightfall. The tension is a physical weight on your chest. You jump at shadows. You fire at movement. Tonight, their job was supposed to be simple. Support infantry units clearing enemy fighters from the Western Industrial District. Their tank sat idling behind the reinforced concrete of a collapsed apartment block, hiding in the shadows while friendly infantry moved through the ruins ahead. Everything had been quiet for nearly an hour. In a war zone, an hour of silence isn't peaceful. It's terrifying. It means someone is maneuvering. Someone is setting a trap. Then, the transmission arrived. Enemy command post confirmed inside 2-story structure at grid 492. Infantry unable to advance. Target must be destroyed immediately. Victor immediately checked the digital map display mounted to the steel hull. Grid 492 pointed to an old, damaged warehouse at the far end of the avenue. From their concealed position, they could just see the jagged roofline above the ruins. Victor didn't hesitate. In urban combat, hesitation costs lives. If the enemy had a command center pinning down their infantry, destroying it would collapse the enemy's defense in the sector. He keyed his internal mic. Sergei, target the warehouse. Armor-piercing, high explosive. Loaded, Anton confirmed, slamming the heavy shell into the breach. Sergei pressed his eye to the thermal scope. The world was rendered in ghostly whites and blacks. He saw heat signatures inside the warehouse. Movement. Target confirmed. I have movement inside. Victor raised the radio. Command, this is Hammer 2. Engaging target at grid 492. No response. Just a faint hiss of static. But the previous order had been absolute. Fire. When the panicked voice from Falcon Squad screamed through the radio, the interior of the tank descended into a suffocating, dead silence. You just destroyed our position. Victor grabbed the heavy radio handset, his knuckles turning white. Say again. Identify yourself. The voice on the other end was choking on dust, coughing violently. Falcon Squad. Friendly infantry unit. We were inside the warehouse. We were setting up an observation post. The crew of Hammer 2 stared at each other. The green lights of the dials illuminated their pale, horrified faces. It was impossible. The coordinates had come from command. They had been specifically told, was an enemy command post. Victor frantically checked the map screen again. Grid 492. Exactly where they had aimed. Exactly where the building had stood. And exactly where Falcon Squad had just been buried under tons of concrete. Pavel. The young driver finally broke the silence, his voice trembling. That doesn't make sense, Captain. We got direct orders. Sergei, his eyes still glued to the thermal scope, watching the burning wreckage of the building, nodded slowly. We confirmed the grid. We did everything by the book. Anton, standing near the smoking breech of the cannon, looked sick. What if command made a mistake? What if they read the map wrong? Victor shook his head, a cold knot forming in his stomach. No, the voice. The transmission came through the command frequency. It had the right encryption tone. Only authorized officers had access to that channel, which meant one of two things. Either the battalion commander had made a catastrophic unforgivable error, or someone else was on their network. Then the radio spoke again. This time, the voice of the infantryman from Falcon Squad was filled with a raw, agonizing fury. You killed 3 of our men. They're gone. They're under the rubble. Friendly fire. It is the darkest, most traumatic nightmare for any soldier. To survive the enemy, only to be killed by your own brothers in arms. It's a guilt that tank crews carry to their graves. Victor forced himself to stay professional, pushing down the rising bile in his throat. Falcon Squad, confirm your last coordinates before the strike. The reply was bitter. Grid 492. And then, a new transmission cut through the frequency. It wasn't the frantic infantryman. It wasn't the battalion commander. It was a voice they didn't recognize. It was calm, smooth, almost amused. Excellent shot. Hammer 2. Right on target. The 4 men inside the tank froze. The unfamiliar voice continued, laced with a chilling, quiet confidence. You eliminated a very dangerous unit for us. Thank you for your service. Victor slammed his thumb onto the microphone transmission button. Identify yourself. The voice just laughed quietly. A soft, sinister sound cutting through the digital static. No need for that, Captain. Then the signal dropped. The realization hit Victor like a physical blow. They hadn't made a mistake. Command hadn't made a mistake. Someone had tricked them. Victor rapidly switched frequencies, bypassing the compromised channel, and contacted the main command headquarters directly. After several tense, agonizing seconds, the real command operator responded. Victor laid it all out. The coordinates, the order, the strike, the intercepted transmission, the dead soldiers, Command was dead silent for what felt like an eternity. When the operator finally spoke, his voice was tight with alarm. Hammer 2. We did not authorize that attack. We have been trying to reach Falcon Squad for 20 minutes. We've been jammed. A cold, creeping dread filled the tank. Someone had perfectly copied their communication signal. An enemy electronic warfare specialist. He had been sitting out there in the dark, listening, scanning, learning their call signs, learning their protocols, waiting for the perfect moment to feed them. A lie. Command spoke again. Listen to me, Hammer 2. We believe an enemy radio specialist is operating somewhere in your district. Your strike was not the first anomaly tonight. 2 other squads reported receiving false retreat orders an hour ago. Inside the tank, the terrifying scope of the situation became clear. They hadn't just been tricked once. Somewhere out there, a single enemy operator was causing absolute chaos across the entire battlefield. He was turning friendly units against each other, moving pieces on a chessboard, all without firing a single bullet. Command issued a new, urgent order. Hammer 2, you are the heaviest asset in the sector. Assist in locating the signal source. A phantom operator is overriding our network. Find him. Victor dropped the handset. His eyes were no longer filled with shock. They were filled with rage. He turned to his crew. New mission. The enemy operator had to be close. Radio signals, especially the kind used to overpower encrypted military channels, weaken quickly when bouncing between the thick concrete of a ruined city, which meant the transmitter was nearby, possibly within a few streets. Sergei gripped the turret controls. Pavel slammed the tank into gear. The 40-ton machine roared back to life, its tracks tearing up the asphalt as it rumbled forward into the dark. Labyrinthine streets. Every shadow looked like an anti-tank ambush. Every window looked like a sniper's nest. But they didn't care. They were hunting a ghost. Within minutes, the radio direction finding equipment in the tank began picking up severe electronic anomalies. Short bursts of data, massive spikes in frequency, all of it originating from the same direction. Sergei pointed toward a heavily damaged communications tower rising above a cluster of abandoned office buildings. There, that's the strongest signal. The bastard is amplifying his transmission using the old tower. Victor peered through his optics. One of the upper floors of the building adjacent to the tower had a faint, flickering light inside. Power in a city that had been dark for a week. That's our guy, Victor said. As the massive tank rolled slowly into the courtyard of the tower, the radio crackled one last time. The calm voice returned. He could see them from his window. I was wondering when you would come looking, Hammer 2. Victor pressed the mic. Your game is over. The voice chuckled softly. You'd be surprised how much damage a few words can do, Captain. How does it feel to pull the trigger on your own men? Victor didn't reply. Instead, he radioed the surviving members of Falcon Squad, who had been quietly advancing behind the tank's cover. Infantry breached the building. Take him alive if you can. Within minutes, heavily armed soldiers stormed the structure. Flashbangs echoed through the courtyard. Gunfire rattled briefly, and then it was over. The enemy radio operator was captured. When Victor eventually went up to the room, he found a terrifying setup. Multiple high-tech radios, heavy signal boosters, laptops running decryption algorithms, military frequency scanners wired to massive battery banks. The man hadn't even carried a rifle. He had just been sitting in the dark, drinking coffee, listening to every transmission, every order, every terrified cry for help, and then repeating them with slight, lethal changes, just enough to cause a disaster back inside the tank. The crew of Hammer 2 sat in absolute silence as the sun began to rise over the ruined city. The operator had been captured. The deadly deception was over. The network was secure again, but the damage was already done. 3 soldiers from Falcon Squad were dead, buried under concrete, killed by their own side. Not because of an artillery misfire, not because of a faulty map, but because one smart, ruthless enemy soldier had realized a chilling truth about modern combat. If you can control what the enemy hears, you don't have to fight them. You can just make them fight themselves. War is usually fought with bullets, armored tanks, and massive explosions. But this story proves that sometimes the most dangerous, devastating weapon on the battlefield is a voice on the radio.1 com order. One false coordinate, one single moment of misplaced trust, and suddenly, you're firing at the wrong enemy. If you enjoy intense military storytelling and deep dives into the terrifying realities of modern combat, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful war stories every week. And tell me in the comments below, what would you do if you discovered someone was secretly controlling your communications in a life or death situation? Because in the wars of tomorrow, the most dangerous soldier won't be the one holding the rifle. He'll be the one holding the microphone.